Hello, everyone's Forest Focus as Nottingham Forest hit the self-destruct button at Aston Villa. A 3-1 defeat, a huge list of errors highlighted by the manager afterwards on Sky. But can you look at the tactics as it's 4 defeats in a row for the Reds ahead of an even more massive game at West Ham next, who at the moment, as we would call this, are losing. Hopefully that stays the same way, but who knows? Got to look after ourselves anyway. So joining me to discuss it all, first of all, is Mark Sutherns. Mark, afternoon, how are you?
Yeah, okay. Yeah, I mean, as I said before, I think the worry is this is becoming a familiar feeling, going on the post-match and feeling a bit deflated, a bit frustrated, and perhaps a little bit disillusioned where we approach the game.
Well, we'll go through it all. We'll go through it all. Just quickly, thanks very much to Jed Cracknell, MKTV, and Anthony OS Bond for signing up for membership. Really appreciate that, everyone. Michael Temple, Temps, how are you doing?
Yeah, I feel good. I think the only team that feel lower than us in a football sense is West Ham, right? If they were to lose to Wolves today, and Tuesday feels increasingly significant.
Yes, all eyes on Molineux, apart from here, hopefully. Man of the match already, because it was struggling to pick a Forest player, is Seb Hutchinson. Thank you very much for doing this after commentating on the game, Seb. How are you?
I'm good. I'll keep you updated with the West Ham score. I'm trying to get it up here, so as the game goes on.
Good on you. Good on you. Right. Seb, kick us off if you would. We always start with just some general thoughts and branch out from there. Just kick us off with your general thoughts on the game.
Well, I'll break it into the two halves, actually, because the first half is the most dominant I've seen a side in terms of territory, possession, maybe not chances, obviously. It didn't have too many efforts on goal. That I've seen this season, actually. Seeing a team live, I could not believe. I think we must have been 10 minutes or so. It felt like about 10 minutes into the game before Murillo had a touch. It felt like John Victor had the most touches of a Forest player, I think, for the first 15 minutes. Villa were racking up, when we have the stats, they get given to us, I'm across them during the game, and they were racking up firsts under Emery and all this sort of stuff for possession, passes in the final third. I mean, Forest had the third fewest passes of a side in the opposition half for any team this season, which again, I'm giving you all these stats, they're depressing to hear, I would imagine, but yet we got to 40 odd minutes into the game and it was still 0-0. And there's always that situation. I've done enough games now to know that obviously scoring goals are important, but teams dominating games, you follow a flow. But you also get the feeling if a team's not testing the opposition goalkeeper enough, you know that the other side's always got a chance. Although as the half was going on, I was wondering, are Forest actually interested in scoring a goal in this game? I'm not entirely sure. And as Dyche sort of stated after the game, he laid it out that was the game plan, really, in that first half, was to keep it tight, maybe play a bit deeper. And they did defend their box reasonably well. When you think the best chance that Villa had was a Watkins opportunity, it was really from a Forest error, essentially. I think Williams getting caught on the ball and it came across to Watkins. Good save from John Victor. So you got all the way through almost to half time. Then what Villa usually do is score a screamer at some point. Watkins scores. Second half, I think there'll be a lot of frustrations in that, because when you've been dominated that much in a game and then you concede really early in the second half, which must annoy every manager ever, and then to get yourself back into the game, having missed a really good chance before then through Bakwa, and thinking, right, now we can capitalise, because Villa been on a winning run, but they would have felt they could have wobbled a bit, having gone on a winning run and then lose a game and think, okay, we need to get ourselves back on track. Didn't capitalise on that. Subs ineffective, and ultimately then once Villa got the third goal, it just felt the game was over. And the two sides played like that as well, and the game just petered to an end. I won't go into any more detail than that because I'm sure we'll get to more bits.
We will. I think for me, Mark, there's two aspects that Seb referenced there that are frustrating. One, I said self-destruct in the intro, like the litany of errors today really, really helped Villa. We'll talk about the goals, but all three were pretty terrible. And I praised Dyche for tactics when he came in. Like, we go to Anfield, we play really well, we make positive subs, we're front foot. We were front foot against Man City, even in a defensive way, if people know what I mean. But the last two games, I do really have to question the tactics personally. Like, I don't understand how you can sit on your 18-yard line and not think it's inevitable. If you're a newly promoted team, maybe, but when you've got Anderson, Murillo, Gibbs-White, lads who can hurt Villa, I personally question the tactics. What did you make of it?
Yeah, I think it's interesting because I listen to the opposition pod that you do. I always listen to those to see what the opposition fans, because they know their team better than we do, and it's always an insight into what are the weaknesses, how should we approach this game. And obviously, the Villa fan has watched them every week and knows that. And he mentioned that, if you come and press us, we don't like that. We don't like being put under pressure on the ball, and we make mistakes, particularly at the back. What you don't want to do is sit back and let us have the ball. And that is exactly what we did. Now, I'm not saying the Villa fan is a tactical genius and knows more than Dyche, but I just felt that was the first worry for me when I saw that for the first 5 minutes. It was like, oh, we're actually doing what the Villa fan said. You don't want to be doing that. So I was worried when I saw that. And I'm not saying that sitting back and trying to hit them on the break is a bad idea. We sat through seasons with Steve Cooper and Nuno where that was basically our tactic. That's what we did. When we did it with Nuno, we did it with menace, we did it with a lot of threat, and we did it with some degree of style. We had players like Alanga and Chris Wood who were firing and offered a threat. We don't have those players now. That's not Sean Dyche's fault, but it's a fact, right? So we can't set up as we did with Nuno because we don't have that degree of threat on the break. And under Cooper, we were a poor side fighting for survival. I don't think we're a poor side at the moment. I do think we're fighting for survival. And obviously Dyche feels that that's how we have to set up now. In an away game against a big side, we have to set up so back foot, sitting so deep. It's like I say, we don't have that menace and threat that we had under Nuno, where it becomes a style of play that we can get results from, in my opinion. And also Villa, you only have to give them a yard and make one or two mistakes. You're going to make mistakes. If you try and play like that over 90 minutes, you are likely to make mistakes. But also Villa have scored more goals from outside the box than any other team in the Premier League. They don't need high quality chances to score goals. Morgan Rogers has done it regularly. Watkins is now doing it, as we saw today, but he's back in form. They've got players who can punish you from outside the box, low quality chances. So I always felt like it was only a matter of time setting up the way we did. Obviously, Sean Dyche, that could get us to a result. I think the ploy was to get to an hour, keep them at 0-0, frustrate them, and then perhaps make changes. But what those changes would have been, I don't know. Only he will know that. But personally, yeah, I think we sat too deep. We were far too passive. We didn't have a threat on the break. And when you don't have a threat on the break, playing like that, I just isn't going to win football matches.
Yeah, I was going to say, I thought it was a matter of time before Villa got a penalty because the amount of touches they were having in our box. But I see Wolves have got a penalty now, so we'll keep an eye on that. Just weighing on tactics, Temps. Am I being too critical of Dyche or not?
Getting to half time at 0-0 pre-match feels like the right way to go. However, after 5 minutes, it didn't look like we were going to keep a clean sheet for 45. After 30 minutes, it certainly didn't. And by half time, we hadn't. But throughout that, when we were set up to thrive on the break, there was no poise for the first ball. There were no players in the passing lanes that we saw established under Nuno that allowed us to go back to front pretty quickly and hurt teams on the break, particularly when Villa have attacking fullbacks like Cash and Maatsen, who had abandoned their post and become part of the offensive side of their game. Villa are a good side, and I don't think we went there expecting to win, but I think we would have much preferred to see a team that were defensively minded, but able to have poise in possession, able to create some semblance of trying to get a foothold in the game, because those stats that were flashing up and Seb was describing painted the picture that we were seeing with our own eyes, which was this was a game of defence versus attack, which Forest weren't willing to change tactically or physically in that first half. And ultimately, the result was a fair one. So I'm not against the mindset that Dyche had going into the game, but I think heads up, watching that game unfold first half, he should have made tactical changes far sooner. There has to be some responsibility taken from the players, I accept. But they were set up as they were briefed to set up, and it's cost us really, really badly in that first half.
Yeah, I agree. Wolves are 2-0 up. I mean, this is going to unfold really badly if people listen back to this, and it's West Ham 3-2 up by the end of the podcast. But I'm getting excited anyway at the moment. The other aspect then, Seb, that you referenced, the flip side of the tactics is conceding goals like that. The teams that get relegated concede. I mean, Dyche is right to point to individual errors as well, isn't he?
Yeah. And let's be frank. Most goals usually come from an error defensively at some point or a magic from the opposition. And I think what watching it live and seeing every goal go in, bizarrely, the one that caught my eye the most was probably the one you're least thinking of a mistake, which would have been right at the start of the second half, John McGinn's first goal. Because I think it was Hutchinson, the wing. Obviously, when you're playing a system whereby you're forced backwards, then your wide men, or essentially with the three up front, those wing forwards, are going to be pushed right back. And that was happening in the first half. I think Bakker actually did a lot of tracking back pretty well, which in the system, what's being asked is what he wants from the manager. Now, Hutchinson did not do that with Cash. I mean, Cash was getting a lot of space in the first half, per se, but he was being relatively well marshalled. But that goal, it caught my eye instantly. I was watching Cash get forward because you're always looking for that spare player. When I'm commentating on games, because space is everything, who is the player in space when a team attacks? And it was Cash, and Hutchinson didn't track him. Now, I don't know if that was his job, but it seemed like that should have been his job. And then once he was free, once that space is open, then a space opens up elsewhere. And then in the end, Villa were able to capitalise. But for that to happen right at the start of the half, that will really annoy the manager, because that's supposed to be the time when players are most alert, you would think, or most at it in the game. And you can't say you're tired at that point. And whenever I've spoken to players who played, say, at a lower level of football, and they say, what's the big difference between, say, playing in League Two, League One and the Premier League? They always say that Premier League players think far quicker. They are consistent with their decision making. And anytime you drop off for a second, they capitalise, the top players. And we're looking at a game like this where I could only really compare it to watching Manchester City a lot, dominating a team, forcing them back, team having scrappy chances on the break and finding a way through. That was recognisable in this one. And all they're waiting for with that type of football is for the opposition to switch off for 1 second and then they're in. So of all the goals, I know it sounds strange because there was more glaring things you'd see to the eye. But I think from John Victor's point of view, rushing out like that, of course, that's a big moment. But also, what causes him to do that? Why is that situation in the game? Now, obviously, Forest are chasing the game, so they might be further up the pitch. But there are errors that happened earlier on in the move as well. But yeah, of all the errors, you can focus on the other ones, and maybe you could say he could have stopped the shot. But I agreed. I think Paul Merson mentioned it at half time. Goalkeepers, for them to set themselves that quickly at that moment from that range, they're not often best placed to do that, bizarrely. I mean, he made an excellent save from Watkins at the start of the game, but that's an instinctive one, really point blank, close to goal. This one is further out, and let's be frank, I mean, Watkins really caught hold of it. And slow motion replays, I know he gets a touch to it, but I think from a manager's point of view, I think it's that John McGinn first goal. That's the one that probably will annoy Dyche the most.
Yeah, there was a lot to talk about. I mean, let's talk about John Victor then. I sort of feel sorry for. I do feel sorry for him. Goalkeeper's such an unforgiving position, and you make a howler, and it stands out. But I mean, I think you can look at him for all three goals today, Temps. Even the second one, like, he comes for it, and he does bizarre punch behind Watkins. If he catches that, then that phase of play doesn't happen. The first one, I think he should save. Even that save from Watkins, which was brilliant, it was still a weird way he did it. He kind of saved it with his legs when he should have gone the other way. I don't know. You can't blame a keeper when he makes a great save. But is this the end of the John Victor experiment and Sells is back in now?
I don't think he was the most culpable player on the pitch for their second goal. That was a bit of a catalogue of errors. The third one's an absolute howler. I don't think he rushed out. I think he was playing sweeper keeper and stood there from the off and was never in the correct position. And looking back, I'm trying to fathom how he got injured, because it looked like an ego injury to me when he was motioning to the bench, having gone down in that situation. So we'll wait and see on that one. But as the challenger to the established goalkeeper to have come in, did as well as he did against Spurs, had a couple of games where he's done okay. Team haven't played particularly well, given him too much protection, and then to have that game where he's had an absolute shocker. Some of it of his own making, some of it not. You have to feel now that Sells will come in, get the West Ham and Arsenal games. If John Victor is to get another chance in January, will be one of the cup matches. Games come thick and fast. I think we've got 10 games in 40 days. Some rotation will be required. I've been pretty consistent that Sells should be our number one keeper, and that's how I see it remaining for the rest of the season in the bigger games. He'd earned his chance. I think he had to keep his place after that Spurs performance, but this is the game that's going to nudge him out of that team, irrespective of the injury.
Can I just pop in on John Victor? I think when the goal went in, I think I said, "Where's the goalkeeper?" Nowhere. That's what I said. So I think that's pretty clear what I thought about his goalkeeper then. But I think it really hit me the way he was upset because you just know for goalkeepers, there's only one spot on the pitch, and he was on this run, and he probably thought in his mind, "Oh, I might have ousted Sells here," because that's how a player should think, really, especially goalkeepers of that level. And he knows now, if he's out now, he may not get back in for a long, long time. It's just the way the cookie crumbles. So, yeah, I'm not trying to get him out of his errors in this game, but I do feel that in these sort of games, it's often more than just the goalkeeper.
Yeah, it's always the goalie that gets the blame, but there were a few others, certainly. Quick word for the Trent navigation before we move on. Lots of games coming up. Got some big games, certainly. This one's just passed, so we're talking about it now. But West Ham versus Forest, 8 p.m. Seb's commentating on that. I'm not sure he's our lucky charm anymore, but you can watch Seb commentating at the nav if you're not clear into the game. And then we've got Wrexham on TV as well. So discount beers, discount pizzas, head down to the nav. You don't need to book or anything, and enjoy the games. Hopefully more than you enjoyed this one, certainly. Do you want to weigh in on John at all, Mark, or do we move on?
Yeah, I mean, I will say he's done it before. I watched the Utrecht game and I watched it back, and Fletch was commentating, and John came out of his goal, met the winger out wide, and we got away with it. Fletch described it as a horrible decision. So he's got previous for making bad decisions in that kind of scenario. So I think we always questioned what it was that Dyche was seeing that meant that Sells wasn't getting back in the side, because obviously Sells was an outstanding goalkeeper last season. He wasn't just like a middling average keeper that perhaps we saw at first. He was one of the best in the Premier League last year, Golden Glove winner, I think. So he was one of the reasons that we were in the table. He was making saves he didn't have any right to make. So although he was shaky earlier in the season, and there were questions over him, certainly at set plays, we still felt that surely it's only a matter of time before he got his place back. And then game after game, it seemed that, oh no, hold on. Does look as though John's cemented this role. But I questioned it. I think many did. And I think the Utrecht incident hinted that perhaps decision-making was a flaw. And today we saw it very starkly. And it, I'm not saying it cost us the game, but it cost us an opportunity to get back into the game, I think. You can look at errors before John did that, but really, you know, we should be mopping up that situation. It was a really strange one as well. It wasn't like the player was right through on goal and there wasn't defenders nearby. So it was just maybe the starting position, as Temp says, was to blame. But yeah, I personally think that Dyche has got to take some responsibility there. He's put his neck out. He's put his trust in John as his number one, clearly. And he's been let down by that incident. But like I say, there was previous as well that indicated that perhaps there was a question mark over him. Before, maybe Sells has got an issue. Maybe Sells' confidence, maybe there's something off the field that has led to that decision. So maybe there's stuff we don't know, but I would expect surely Sells is restored now.
I think so. I put out on Twitter that was worse than anything Matt Turner did. And I did remember the Liverpool incident where he flew out and Salah went round him, but I just thought that was even worse, unfortunately, because I mean, he was 20 yards from getting the ball. Anyway, let's move on. I mean, like I say, it wasn't just him. Even in my notes as well, Seb, I've written here, like, Milenkovic has been our top defender, but he didn't really close Watkins down. You could argue he was a bit slow to get to McGinn for the second goal. It was a real collective malaise, wasn't it, as well?
So just to go back, I was just thinking of the Turner error against Brentford as well.
Oh,
with
yeah.
Wissa, do you remember that one?
That was after that. Temps wasn't having him after that, and that was about 10 games in.
I'm not surprised. Yeah, it was a funny game. I just think they were so busy defensively that there was bound to be mistakes at some point. And this is the issue. I think if you're a side who are going to defend like that, I'm trying to think of a high-profile example. I know Mourinho's teams did it from time to time. I know Arsenal have done it this season as well, whereby their sides were happy not to have the ball and defend very well. But these are also sides that can really hurt the opposition the other way. I do find it a strange tactic, but I also think it was born out of the Everton match, and probably it would have fed through to him that Forest probably felt, were they too proactive in that game? We know the billion crosses they put into the box against centre-halves who head it away all day long. And maybe thought, well, why don't we try that? We'll sit off a team and maybe Villa will get crosses in. But this is not how Villa play. And they will play how they played, in that their fullbacks will get forward and they will shuffle the ball around the edge of the box and look for shooting positions, because so many of their players are confident in doing that. I thought from Milenkovic's point of view, I think in the second half he had an awkward moment with Marlon where he's holding onto his shirt, Marlon's holding onto him, he's holding onto him, and I just thought there's too much holding going on here for a centre-half, really. You're running the risk. And they were defending so much at times, I felt that players can almost get in each other's way. So you're going to have a moment where the ball doesn't bounce your way. There's going to be a ricochet. I've seen West Ham defend like that this season. So it was also worrying to see Forest defend like that, because, as you can say, that's relegation form defending. And Forest may be fortunate because of if West Ham do lose to Wolves in the end, that's a big break. But I just we know it's a team game, and the platform of it was other things that stood out to me in that first half, because that was the build of the game. Elliot Anderson, so used to him getting on the ball, popping the passes, being confident. He felt rushed in the game. He felt like he was trying to get the ball forward quickly. It felt like they swarmed around him at every opportunity. Gibbs-White having to do so much defending, so much tracking back, frustrated, and his finish was lovely, but he wasn't able to do that enough in the game, and he would have looked at that game and thought, I want to get into the England side. Morgan Rogers is the player in that position who seems to be holding that position at the moment for England. The work I'll have to do that. And I'm trying to find positives in the game overall, but there aren't really that many. And it's difficult because you came into this game thinking it's going to be a difficult game for Forest. But I generally did not think that they would be on the back foot as much as they were, actually. That did surprise me. Having seen most of Forest's games this season and seen most of Villa's games this season, as is my job. So, yeah, they were... That did surprise me. I do think that's something that he'll look at and think, well, obviously we cannot be anywhere near this sort of situation against West Ham for sure.
Well, Wolves are 3-0 up, so that's the big positive today, because there's not much else. So we'll cling to that and keep following that, certainly. Just listening to what Seb says there, Temps. I mean, I don't know if you watched Liverpool Leeds or Man City Sunderland. Sunderland and Leeds, they both, they played like we did against City, really, but defensively minded first, carry a threat on the break, offer a presence. Is Dyche trying to get into his head here? Is he confused as to what he wants us to be? Is he retreating into his stereotypes? I don't know.
I just think there's degrees of it, Matt. So there's defensive and there's ultra defensive, and there's parking 11 lads in 2 lines of 5 in front of a goalkeeper. And I think you just have to be aware of the degrees of that and have your eyes open, heads up, see how the opposition play against you and counter that. But this group of players is a far better group of players than the Forest squads that we've seen battling relegation. And I think there's a bit of a confusion when you've got ballers in your team like Elliot Anderson, like Morgan Gibbs-White, like the wingers today, really accomplished Premier League dribblers that can create threat and that can get at attacking fullbacks. When your game plan is built around frustrating the opposition rather than imposing yourself, you're inherently defensively minded, and the ceiling of what you can achieve is far, far lower. We'd have celebrated a point today. Of course you would. If off the back of that we go and beat West Ham on Tuesday night, Dyche is a genius. But I think that for him to survive long term as the Forest manager, and I'm talking 18 months plus here, that there needs to be a degree of risk taken to get the best out of this squad of players, many of whom I don't think would be too mindful to be a part of a defensive team trying to simply avoid defeat for all too long. One final point on the keeper. I'm happy for John Victor to be our number 2 keeper. I don't think he's got the fundamental flaws in his game like Matt Turner had, who was a non-footballer who struggled to control the ball, couldn't distribute, ran around it in a slightly odd way. And you could kind of tell that he'd come to football particularly late. I'm happy for John Victor to be our number 2 that plays the cup games, that understudies for Matt Sells and takes the pressure off when we've got these run of fixtures. I'm not advocating for him being jettisoned out of the squad, but I think Matt Sells is a better keeper. In terms of the mindset, let's hope West Ham is a springboard to something different, because if we're going to queue up against top 10 Premier League teams in a defence versus attack, mentality, and just try to weather the storm. That is not getting the best out of this group of players. That is not going to give us enough opportunities to take 3 points from enough games to ease clear of where we find ourselves now. And I don't think that would end well for Dyche. Look, prior to this run of 4 games, had been circumspect, had been balanced. I don't think we were ever gung-ho, but he'd set up teams, particularly at home, where we'd ripped some pretty accomplished sides apart. And I think that the Tottenham game was the best example of that. But off the back of that, I think you then need to get into the players this level of confidence, this belief that they can impose their style, their skills, their creative freedom. And Elliot Anderson and Morgan Gibbs-White do far better when they're given that brief. Go out there and don't be boring to climb this table. So I am the most concerned I've been at any stage of the season right now because of the setup I've seen in the last 4 games, and I suppose the lack of willingness to amend the game plan in game.
Yeah, I mean, it's not a conversation for today, but if we do survive this season, we play like that, I don't think Dyche will be here next season because Marinakis wants more than that. But that's for a different conversation because I'm very worried we won't survive this season. Just one more on the tactics, Mark. Like, Elliot Anderson had a horrible game today, but if he's getting the ball surrounded by 4 players on the edge of his 18-yard box, I kind of think, what's he meant to do?
Yeah, it reminded me of the Fulham performance in that respect, in that I think our midfield just didn't get any time on the ball. And when they did get the ball, they were hesitant as to what to do with it. I just think that we've lost sight of a system of play somewhat. I think obviously we've accused Dyche of being a bit one-dimensional, get the ball wide, get crosses in. Today, I don't know what our approach was really. It wasn't really clear. We didn't have an identity when we went forward with the ball. I guess we were looking to counter, but like I said, we didn't really have the weapons on the pitch that we had under Nuno to do that effectively, in my opinion. We did a couple of times in the first half and didn't really capitalise on it, but I'm not surprised. Like I said, we don't have Langer, we don't have Chris Wood making the smart runs. So yeah, I felt a bit sorry for Anderson and Gibbs-White. Seb was absolutely right. You know, they were doing, Sean says, hard yards. Yeah, but these are players that can do more than that. You know, this isn't Josh Brownhill you're dealing with now. These are England internationals, and one of them's in the England 11. And really, we should be setting up in a way that gets more out of those players. And that is what's most worrying about the trend that we're seeing, in my opinion. Even the Everton performance, like I still saw Anderson going right and left rather than looking for vertical passes through the middle that could really cut Everton apart. It was more get the ball wide, and that's a waste. That's a waste of Gibbs-White. That's a waste of Anderson. Those players are capable of cutting through defence with their passing and vision. Murillo is as well, but Murillo seems to be just muted now. He's not doing that. He's trying to play Hollywood passes that are getting cut out, but he's not looking for those passes down the middle through the lines. That's got to be tactics. That's got to be coaching, because it was there before. It was there before for Anderson. It was there before for Murillo. So something is being trained into them as the weeks go by that is taking that out of them. And they are quality players, and those are their best qualities. And we're losing it. And where else do you look but Sean Dyche for that?
Yeah, well, we said what a good job he was doing when he first came here, and how the football belied what we expected. So we have to say when it doesn't.
Okay. Can I just say something on that? These are his words earlier in the week. He said this week that we weren't winning the games we should be winning where expectation is raised. And he said the big games sometimes take care of themselves. And when he said that, I thought he's almost saying there that he doesn't have to do much in the big games because they take care of themselves. Those are his words. So the games where we've got results, you can look at it, or where we played well, were those big games where he himself is saying, well, sometimes they take care of themselves. The games where we need him to have an influence and set the team up and prepare them are Fulham away, Everton at home. Perhaps today. I didn't have high expectation today, but like Seb said, I didn't expect us to be so back foot.
Oh, it's an absolute commentator's feast today. Adam Summerton's in the chat now saying balance.
Should I try and make you feel a bit better?
Yes, please.
Right.
Go on then, Seb.
Wolves are 3-0 up against West Ham. West Ham have had one shot in this first half. Wolves have never scored 4 goals in the first half of a Premier League match. They've still got, I think, 30 more seconds to do that. And don't bear in mind, obviously, one of Forest's worst performances this season, worst results this season, was the 3-0 defeat to West Ham, who obviously Nuno was the Forest manager at that time, is now the West Ham
Seb, don't
manager.
tell me Wolves are going to come roaring back. I'm clinging on it.
we played them away, Tim, so we've got them at home.
Oh, that's true. They might close the gap. They'll close the gap. Burnley are losing as well. Don't forget about Burnley.
Yeah. I mean, what's this West Ham performance, Seb? I mean, lose there 3-0.
I'm not suggesting Nuno's going to be sacked twice in a season, because I think the problems with West Ham are bigger than that. And they've moved on from, which usually happens, is the process. When you sack that many managers, it then moves on to the management. But they've been angry at the management for a long, long time. So they've got, their problems are, I think, on another level to Forest. Doesn't mean they can't close the gap, but they don't look good. And even looking at their side today, I'm just thinking they've tried everything. He's tried so many things, Nuno, to turn that around. It's quite weird to talk about him when he was Forest manager at the start of the campaign, but we're in this weird position. I mean, he's losing to one of these old clubs now, and I covered Wolves at Manchester United, saw them against Arsenal. I think they're a team that, you know, recently the results haven't matched it. They were narrowly beaten by Liverpool, so they're not quite the whipping boys that people think they are. But even for them to go to Molineux today, where they haven't won, they haven't even got a draw at all season, that's a shocking result for West Ham at half-time. As you could say, this could date, and they've made one of the all-time comebacks. Very unlikely, it has to be said. So I'm trying to give you something that will make you feel a bit better. You know, if you're bad, think of the three below you. That's the other way of looking at it.
When you think about Tuesday as well, Seb, like, I know we're very down today, and a few fans are turning on Dyche, but generally I think Forest fans are patient. It's going to be absolutely toxic on Tuesday, isn't it? Potentially, it's if Forest can actually get the first goal, especially.
Yeah. Well, it's one of those stadiums that, you know, I've said it many times. I don't like going there from a point of view of looking at the game. My father-in-law is also a West Ham season ticket holder, and the problem is the atmosphere there. The fans don't want to be in that ground because they miss Upton Park so much. The new ground has got so many issues, but they are in that ground. They recognise that. But yes, when they fall behind, it's turned from toxic to just resignment. But I think the game on Tuesday will be different because they recognise this is our chance to close the gap on probably the most vulnerable side to be dragged into that. I still have the belief that Forest will be fine, but I base that off seeing all the teams. I thought they'd be even more fine until I saw Leeds went on this run, their change of shape, their improvement, so they've kicked on. That doesn't mean to say that Forest won't finish above Leeds, obviously, as well. But that game has become another one of those moments in the season. A game that maybe at the start of the season we thought would just be one of those 3 o'clock on a Saturday matches, but it's certainly not that. It feels, arguably the biggest game of the week in many respects of that midweek period, and that's with, other games like Arsenal and Liverpool taking place, because you feel like the loser of that will start to seriously think they're in big trouble.
I think so, because just one more on that one, Thames, before we move on. I mean, I said just now, we're playing like a team have you got the kids? Do I need to go to Mark?
No, carry on, mate. I have got the kids, but they're being remarkably well behaved.
Was that a certain look that Temps gave you?
I don't know. Just so, anyway, as I was saying, I said just earlier, we're playing like a team that's going to get relegated the last 4 games, which is true, but West Ham are playing even worse. So the winners of that game, we would hope, can take some momentum. I mean, I know people say we're halfway through a season, never must win. It's certainly not must. It's certainly mustn't lose, isn't it?
It's a 6-pointer for the first time, isn't it? I worked at London Stadium for a couple of seasons, and I've seen the best and the worst of the atmosphere there. It can be extremely loud and supportive when it's going well for West Ham, but invariably it hasn't since they've been there. And they arrived off the back of probably one of their best ever seasons at Upton Park. But what a chance for a reset. And the question was going through my mind then as Seb was speaking. Are we seeing now the difference between a team with a 1-goal Premier League striker and a 20-goal Premier League striker? So I don't think too much has changed across the back line, aside from Olaraina's injury, and he'll play his way back in. We've got Morgan Gibbs-White and Elliot Anderson, another season on, further developed as established Premier League central midfielders. We've all lauded Jesus qualities as a back to goal striker, pulling the ball out of the sky, bringing everybody else, but he's not providing the goal threat in the Premier League that we perhaps hoped for. And there were quite a few games last year where our discussion was, look, we haven't really played particularly well there, but geez, Woody's pulled one out of the bag for us and turned that game with really efficient use of his chances. Igor Jesus is not taking chances anything like efficiently. I think Mark put a stat in the group this week highlighting the lack of efficiency from Jesus. And I think teams that recognise where our weakness is are able to impose themselves pretty easy just by suffocating that central midfield dynamism of Gibbs-White and Elliot Anderson. Because when there was an abundance of threat with Chris Wood, with Elanga when he was in his pomp last season, with Callum Hudson-Odoi, it was very, very difficult to pin down a particular weakness at Forest. Whereas now I think if you suffocate Elliot Anderson, make him play as a deep, lying, creative player, don't let Morgan Gibbs-White get on the ball too often, invariably you're going to come away with the spoils. So, yeah, massive game. I am blindly optimistic about our chances in that game. I think that West Ham are in a far deeper mire than us. But I'm concerned about the striker conundrum. There's a world in which Chris Wood doesn't play again this season, and Igor Jesus looks like he's running out of ideas in the Premier League.
Yeah, we'll just expand on that in one sec. As Brucey says, there's 630 people with us now. Do us a favour and hit like if you haven't already. That would be very much appreciated. Mark, on strikers, I mean, you're our Igor Jesus correspondent. He did put a stat in that was grim in the WhatsApp group about shots blocked, XG, absolutely horrific. And I'd agree with Temps's point generally. But again, going back to today, I don't know what the lad's supposed to do because there was really nothing for him to go at. But and then obviously just expanding on that, Kalimuendo looks like he's going to go to Eintracht Frankfurt, and we spoke that they can spot a striker on the pod the other day. So I assume we're getting someone in. We have to get someone in, but it's a worrying time as well with the strikers, isn't it?
Yeah, I think that's the frustrating thing, isn't it? That I don't blame Igor Jesus. I don't think he didn't arrive at the club with a reputation being a potent goal scorer, a prolific scorer of goals. He's an all-round player who can run the channels, link play, and he's done exactly what he was billed to do, really. I mean, perhaps we were expecting a few more goals. He got some in Europe against weaker opponents, you could say, lesser defenders. He has struggled. I just think he lacks that striker's instinct. The thing that is hard to describe, the thing that Chris Wood has got that makes him a 20-goal striker, that instinctive knowledge to know where to run, where to position himself, where the ball's going to go. It's you can't teach that. It's very hard to train it. There's natural goal scorers. It's a thing. Chris Wood is one. Igor Jesus isn't. So that is a problem we've got. Kalimuendo could have been and had a record to suggest he might have been. And that is why it's frustrating that he's had so few opportunities, given that is a key problem. Why he's had so few opportunities, I don't know. Who knows? We're not seeing in training, are we? And Sean said about, Tyro having numbers which meant that he selected him over Kalimuendo. I find that hard to believe. I'm sure many people do as well, but I think it had more to do with the fact that Kalimuendo is out the club, is making that move, and Sean was obviously not using him as much because of that. Now, hopefully, we've got someone lined up, because what I worry about is by letting him go first, we're now in a almost desperate situation. We have to get a striker in over this window. And so it doesn't put us in a very strong negotiating position, does it? The fact that clubs know this. So hopefully we're letting him go with a deal already halfway done and assured. But yeah, you're absolutely right. We've got to bring somebody in, and it's got to be someone, presumably, who can play the way that Sean wants to play, which is to get on the end of crosses and do what Chris Wood can do.
I'll just throw it to in 1 sec. Thank you very much to Chris Gell for membership. Appreciate that. Bonju, you'll keep your membership in the championship. May we need a discount? That's very much to be decided. We'll cross that bridge later. Don't worry. Seb, you were nodding along with a fair bit on the strikers front there. I mean, Ollie Watkins has smashed one in from 20 yards today, and sometimes that's the difference. But we linked with Strand Larsen. Great season last season, horrible season this season. What are your thoughts on our striking situation?
To touch on Strand Larsen, I think the issue was his head was turned at the start of the campaign. I think he's been linked to Newcastle as well. So maybe that could explain his drop in form. It is quite alarming. It was touched on earlier on that when we think back to the Brentford game right at the start of the season, particularly the first half, the way that Forest played in that game for me, felt the template for the players that they have. And we've seen, obviously, now a series of managers be in this situation where they just can't get that to click consistently. But we're looking at players that have been linked. You think of Anderson and Gibbs-White have been linked to Manchester City in recent times. Gibbs-White almost out the door. And so they're players who want to be on the front foot, want to be playing well. Now, I'm saying this because the striker, the player leading the line, they have to work with that system. How are they being fed? How are things happening for them? You look elsewhere. Now, you have. Don't like using the word freak, of course, but in the case of like Haaland, who transcends that a bit. But you look at certain players like Šeško now at Man United. How is he being used? How is Gyökeres being used at Arsenal? How is Delap being used at Chelsea? João Pedro? How do these players work in the system? For Forest, I mean, their goal-scoring woes are the big issue. I mean, I was looking at the goals they've conceded. They've obviously conceded, 3 today, and a couple against City, and a couple against Everton, and that actually distorted what was actually looking a pretty good defensive record when you looked at the league. I mean, it's a top half record really, but underperforming the XG, as we say, and Villa aside overperforming the XG. I think he's Jesus. I looked at it; he lost 12 duels in the match, which doesn't look good for him. When you are the lone man up front, you want to be the player to hold the ball up, bring others into the game, get your team up the pitch. If you're not able to do that, and I know he was up against, 2 defenders who don't mind that side of the game, and Cons has been a standout for Villa in that regard. Kalimuendo didn't totally understand the signing because I didn't really see what Forest wanted to get out of him, but it felt good at the point of just bolstering your attack, just get options into the front line. But options are only useful if you play to that player's style. So if they do bring somebody in, what type of striker are you looking to see? Because are you looking to see a striker that is going to suit the way Sean Dyche wants to play? If that's the case and it doesn't work, you're then loaded with a striker who then doesn't work in a more expansive system, say. I remember when Sean Dyche was Everton manager, and I'll never forget it, because Luton's commentary position was excellent when they were in the Premier League, and you were really close to the benches. And I could hear Dyche shouting constantly at Calvert-Lewin through the match. He wanted him in the channels all the time. Be our outlet in the channels, because when this is them against Luton, don't forget, Everton against Luton. He wanted him to be the player to get in the wide areas, get on the ball, hold it up, get us into the game. If you play a long ball to a striker who's in a central area, the centre halves are going to gobble him up most of the time. So if you play it in the channel, he can get onto that. Maybe that would help Igor Jesus a bit more. You'd have to feel a player who's been capped by Brazil as something can bring more to the table. What is missing? 1 goal. He's had a run of games as well. I think it was his 12th or 13th straight start. You'd want more out of that, wouldn't you?
Yeah, the commentator on Sky said it was his 12th straight start. Anyway,
Did he? I believe him then.
Yeah, listen to that guy. Yeah, definitely. Right, excuse me. Just before we go start wrapping things up, one more on this game. I'll read out Dyche's comments afterwards and just see what the chaps make of them. Speaking to Sky afterwards, this is what he said. And he did praise the mentality and the work rate a lot, just to caveat this, but this was his first answer, which I think is always telling. The question was, what positives can you take from that? Which was an interesting first question as well from Juliet Farrington. Anyway, Dyche said, the whole game plan was to frustrate them. We know how they play. They've got very good players. Their run speaks for itself. Then he says, it's tough as a manager. The players did everything we asked them in the first half, kept it tight. And then the players make odd decisions. 30 seconds before half time, the game plan is now changed. 3 minutes into the second half, it's changed again from basic errors. It's unfortunate because we've done that too many times. I must say the reaction was excellent. We had to go on the front foot, take a risk, and we scored a goal. We conceded a third, and you can all see it's a mistake. It's a tough one. The mentality's there, but we can't make basic errors like that. I mean, Temps, from a messaging point of view, which is your job, I mean, he is right, what he says, but he's dug out refs after Man City. He's sort of dug out the players there. That's a card you can only play so many times, I think, to me. Or am I reading too much into it, do you think?
Well, he's done it in an understated way, hasn't he? He hasn't targeted any particular player, and he hasn't been averting that. So it's a subtle message from Sean Dyche that he's not particularly happy with some of the application. But I think in his heart of hearts, when he watches that tape back and analyses the manner in which he's set up, and I suppose that the lack of a change to the plan, which is the key point I've made again and again and again in the last hour, it's not going to sit too well with him. And I think that playing in a more balanced manner and taking some risk may have enacted the same result, but would have created far more positivity and feeling and sentiment amongst players and fans as to what they can achieve when they go toe to toe with teams. Because playing West Ham on Tuesday in the biggest game of the season so far, given the relative position of the clubs, and he has to change things in quite an overt manner now. We can't go there and do it again, because that potentially 5 defeats in 5, and in 3 of those games, not making any particular effort to impose ourselves on the game and earn a right to play in the first half. I think it's strangling some of our key players who need the leash loosening if they're going to fulfill their potential, and that simply has to start on Tuesday night. So look, if I'm giving Dyche here mark out of 10 for his tenure so far, it's probably a 7.5, because he had steadied the ship. He'd got us to a point where we could see what was going on. There was a logic in selection and tactical decisions and everything else. However, that's ebbed away, and that was a 3 or 4 out of 10 today. And I think we need to see some change come Tuesday night.
Yeah, I see in the WhatsApp chat, Mikey's watching the game and he says they've only got Somerville and Bowen. You've got to close them down, get high up the pitch, can't play like we did today. So it'll be interesting to see how we go about it, certainly. Just before we wrap things up with some final thoughts from each of the chaps then. Thanks very much to Nottingham Window Company. Appreciate their support as second sponsors of this show. If you're looking for new windows or doors across the East Midlands, then do check out what they've got to offer by clicking the link in the description and having a look on their website. Right. Mark, final thoughts. Anything you want to add before we go?
I am critical of Dyche. That's obvious. I don't want to see him sacked, obviously, because we don't want a 4th manager. But the concern for me is the longer his tenure is going on and the more familiarity the players presumably are getting with his system, the worse the performances are becoming. Not against Man City, but in Dyche's words, that maybe took care of itself. But against teams where we should be a match, if not more than a match, we are struggling for a system of play and a way of playing that gets the most from our big players, our key players, and wins us football matches. And it just concerns me that initially Dyche, did steady the ship, and initially he got a lot of things right. But the longer it's going on, and presumably he's having more of the way he wants to play, he's getting through to the players, the performances are dipping. And it's not the outlier now. It's now almost becoming the norm. It's 4 defeats in a row. He's got to get a team out against West Ham that puts in an effective performance and a winning performance, in my opinion. I think if we get 3 points there, we've got a buffer. We can't relax, but it gives us a buffer, and it probably would be a nail in the coffin for West Ham. They are spending. They're going to try and get themselves out of it like that. As we know, in January, that's very difficult to do, so I don't put too much confidence in that, but they're making moves. We can't afford to lose the game. In my opinion, we should go there and try and win it. So let's see what Sean Dyche can do, because we've got better players than what we showed today in that game and how we set up today in that game.
I'll give Seb the last word. I'll just put this one on screen, Temps. Feel free to weigh in general. Tom says players share the brunt of responsibility as well. It is a mad season. 3 managers, loads of change. We've discussed recruitments at length and all the context around it. But just respond to Tom and then weigh in with your final thoughts as well, if you don't mind.
Yeah, well, no player is enjoying 3 managers in a season. Absolute madness. However, that's gone. Irrelevant in the past. So what do we do from here? Pick the best keeper. That's Matt Sells. Trust that back 4. Oleraina's fit again now. There's an established back 4 that were lauded by anyone that watched Forest play last season, enable them to get back to what they're going to be. Midfield, without the ball, less passive. Let's encourage them to be more active, to take some risk, to fly out, to try and affect the ball before we're camped inside our own box and have established Premier League attacks, just picking us apart, moving the ball, changing the point of attack and finding a way to probe and get in. Wingers, I think we've got to pick the best 2, which are for me, Callum Hudson-Odoi, who was clearly injured today, and Mark Hutchinson, who's earned his place, works really hard to do that, and looks like he could affect games. And then my recruitment plea would be find someone that can back up Chris Wood and offer a different option to Igor Jesus, who hasn't been a dud, but he's not proving that he can do it in the Premier League. Now, Sean Dyche can affect every single element of that in very different ways. Some of it's tactical, some of it's freedom and allowing players to just be themselves and to express themselves and to get on the front foot and do what they do. And the final bit is to have that influence in the the recruitment process, which is a bit of a myriad of complexity at Forest at times. But I think he can see, and those around him can see, what's needed to get us away from the trouble that we find ourselves in now. Sean Dyche can influence all of that, and if he does, I'll be his biggest cheerleader.
I should give Seb the last word. I'll just put this one up from Pat, and I'll respond to it and see if Seb wants to weigh in. Pat says, I'll be happy to see him sacked. We need a progressive coach, and Dyche isn't it. I mean, I would agree with that in the sense of the summer, personally, because, you know, that's a different conversation. Just right now, I feel like 4 managers is a bit crazy. If things carry on and we keep losing, we lose to West Ham, we lose to Brentford, we lose to Arsenal, then maybe it's a conversation. But the flip side of every conversation is who takes the job. And you've already got the relegation firefighting manager, so I can't go to Sam Allardyce, and I don't think, you know, Pep or Jurgen Klopp are going to take it. So we're in a really shitty situation, frankly, and I feel like we just get through it. Hello, Temple Junior. For please who are listening, not watching, Temp's daughter's on screen. So that's my take right now around the manager. I hear what Pat and people like that are saying, but I feel like we're not there yet, and I hope we can turn things around, starting at West Ham to ease these conversations. But it is a massive game, certainly. Right, Seb, last word to you before we go.
Well, I'm hoping the way you can look at these things is things before the Fulham game, which I'm sorry I did that one as well. I think I'm on maybe 4 straight Forest defeats, might be something like that. But before the Fulham game, I think if he'd won that, he'd have made the most successful start of any Forest manager ever. So it's just amazing how the positioning of things at various points in time. I haven't changed this whole season, even though Forest have been through all these ups and downs and a fair few downs. I've just felt that there are 3 worse sides at every point in the season. I've never felt they were going to be a team that were going to go down. And I still feel that way. I do feel that way. And West Ham are helping with that massively. I would say it is a concern perhaps to be constantly chasing your tail and thinking, how do you play against these sides? Even with the City game, I still think once they got it back to 1-1 in that sort of scenario, to then fall behind again, and I know it's Manchester City, but again, that felt tough, and the goal was a bit messy, and I know there was controversy over whether it should have stood and things like that. But even there's disappointment to even take from a game like that, because you see the way Sunderland kept City out only a few days ago. So essentially, the way to sum up from a Forest point of view and trying to think from a Forest fan's point of view and trying to give some positivity, you don't want to be sacking another manager, because it does become farcical in that situation. You have to trust that Sean Dyche is going to be your man to take you through to the end of the season, because he's been in this position before and he has got teams out of it before. You could also argue they're in it because of the way he plays. They're never going to be a side pushing on. But I think that's why he's been brought in. We know his connections with the club. We know at this point in time, the key thing is keep us up and go deep in the Europa League. I didn't say it in jest in the game when I said, you know, Forest Villa final in Istanbul would make everybody, perhaps, if you stay up, forget most of this season. But I do think it will be something, whatever happens, that they'll look again at the summer, because you look at games like the last 4 games and you think, what is the style of play? Is this the side that's going to have Forest back competing for European places again? I wouldn't have thought so. But they certainly are a team, even though the signings haven't worked, a team that should be staying up this season. And that's based on me having seen every other side in the league on more than one occasion.
Hopefully you're right. I mean, you say there's 3 worst teams. There might literally be 3 worst teams, but right now I'll take it. We'll see what Tuesday brings, certainly. Right.
It's all that matters.
Yeah, it is. It's a bit miserable to be back in that position, but we've discussed that a lot as well. Right, if you've enjoyed this, do us a favour, hit like, hit subscribe, consider membership or Patreon, or a lovely 5-star review on Apple or Spotify. It would be great. We're back on Monday at noon with Pete, Mikey and former Reds defender James Perch will join us for that. We'll preview the West Ham game in full and reflect on this a bit more and discuss transfer rumours. Thanks to Mark. Thanks to Temple ×3, because there's 3 of them here now, or both kids are there. So thanks very much to those guys. And thanks very much to Seb, especially, for joining us from Villa Park. You've got a bit of a journey home now, Seb, and it's
I'm staying in Birmingham because I'm doing the Blues tomorrow. So
okay.
So
can I just say,
nicely.
Seb, I've always thought you were very stylish. I thought that Louis Vuitton.
Oh, yeah.
I thought that was harsh.
That's itchy though. I walked into that one as well though. Although my wife did text me and she did say, "Can we get one of those?" And And then she said, I'm only joking.
Lovely stuff. Right. Thanks for everyone who's joined us. I thought that was a really good chat and hopefully broke things down and people appreciate it anyway. So do hit like before you go. Do subscribe. And if we don't see you on Monday, we shall see you soon.